Hello, everyone. With me today is Bobby Newman and Bobby Rogers. They have partnered to shed light on how COVID has affected our special needs population. Dr. Bobby Newman is a world-renowned psychologist and behavior analyst and author of many publications and books such as The Behavior Detectives and What the Function. Bobby Rogers is a parent advocate, nonprofit founder, and director of Proud Moments Therapy in Syracuse, New York. Today, they will be interviewing Christina Stearns. Christina is a parent advocate, founding member of the Santia A. Chandler Incorporated Foundation, and past board member of FEAT of Central New York. So, Dr. Newman, why don't we have you take over from here?
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Hello, Christina. Hello, Bobby.
Hey.
I was wondering, Christina, to get us started, to give our viewers and listeners some background, can you tell us a little bit about your son, Alec?
Sure. So Alec is a complex guy. He's 15 right now. He's about to turn 16 next month. And when he was almost 10, we started to see some changes in him. And it just seemed like autism wasn't all that we were dealing with anymore. And as we went on, we added epilepsy, and that was the obvious diagnosis, but then others were added, some psychiatric issues as well. And when those were added, it seemed that we just started to have a more difficult time adding in medications, trying different things, always using behavioral therapy approaches, and just anything. And we came to a point where he was hospitalized and we had to go out of state to get him the care that he needed. And it was just realized at that time, and at that time he was about 9, 10, that he needed a very rigid, things needed to be the same for him throughout the day, just very, very rigid. And it was suggested that residential care was possibly the only way that could provide that type of sameness throughout the day. And so when we got him discharged, we had him on a waiting list, and then he was accepted into a program an hour away from us. And he transitioned to that program very, very well. The routine of his day was kept the same all the time, whereas before his school day, just riding a bus and getting to school and being, as parents being called to, can we pick him up an hour later or an hour and a half later? We can't maintain this behavior. To never getting a phone call about behavior at school unless it was something really escalated, which they were prepared to deal with. It was just a wonderful thing for him. He really blossomed in that care. So he's been in residential with the same program at a different campus of theirs now the past year, and going very, very well for him.
So you said two things that really struck me. One, you talked about his need for routine and for things to be the same, and also the fact that he's currently residential. And I think both of those are things that stuck out when you were talking for me because of the current lockdowns, quarantines, the last lockdown being months long. So tell me a little bit about how that affected both your son and your family.
So in March, when we all first started hearing about what was going on with the virus, in New York State, we were, on pause, New York pause. And what happened was our group residences and so the IRAs and the ICFs, those are the acronyms for the different type of group arrangements. They were put on pause as well, just like nursing homes, because they're considered congregate facilities where you have a large number of unrelated people living in the same home. So his house is 6 people, 6 boys from the age of about right now 14 to 20, and they max out at 21. But they were put on pause, and we were told that we would not be able to visit our son. And we didn't know how long this was going to last. And that was pretty traumatic.
Yes, that uncertainty is really something that we've talked about in some of our interviews. And again, just like Bobby, I was struck when you were first speaking by 2 things. One, the multiple diagnoses makes things very, very difficult to find a program in the first place. So many people will tell you, oh, we only deal with this particular population or that particular population. So that made finding a program for your son so much more difficult, I'm sure. And then, again, your emphasis on the need for schedule and that very comforting structure. And if COVID did anything, it blew that to Hades, where everything got completely screwed up. And again, it wasn't even like we could offer an alternative because none of us knew when. Sort of, if we talked about the fact that if we saw an end zone in sight, if there was a time limit, if there was a something, we could work around that and assure people and have calendars to check it off and things that people could relate to. But those of us who were supposed to be in the structure providing role had to say, no, so often that it just, again, that compounded everything just tremendously. So going back to March, when things sort of started, I mean, we now got information that it may have been around a lot longer, but March is definitely when many things hit the proverbial fan. Can you recall or tell a little bit about how the initial disruptions happened in yours and Alex's life and, sort of a progression of where it's gone from there?
Sure. So we were actually, there are a few silver linings to a child being residential. And we really tried so much to focus on those things because so many things were out of our control. So the first thing is that at that moment in time, we had, it's like the stars aligned, and the staff in his house is just the perfect mix of people that he responds to. And it was, if we ever had to be in a lockdown, it would be with those people in his house at that moment. And they all stuck it out. Nobody left out of fear. They had already started wearing masks for the flu season. And so our kids are used to seeing their staff wearing the same masks because it was flu season. And they told me this when I said, oh, is he going to freak out because he can't see their faces? And I forgot that the previous couple of weeks, they had started wearing those surgical masks that a lot of people are wearing now. And that their program had the supply of masks, whereas maybe some others didn't. And from what I'm hearing, they're a lot more strict about their staff wearing the masks. So I knew that Alec wasn't going to be questioning, why can't I see their faces? And that was a big deal. He was used to seeing that. And that was very comforting to me and my husband. So as we went on, the kids didn't have to wear a mask because, of course, none of them could really tolerate it at first. And they're on a mask wearing goal where they're trying to get them. Alec has worn his mask well for a couple of appointments, and during lockdown he had a couple of neurology appointments, and that doctor was very wonderful that when he was inconsistent about wearing the mask in the waiting room, he was okay with that. But then he would put it back on. And so it was inconsistent where some doctors wouldn't be okay with that. And it had to be an in-person appointment for what he was going for. So otherwise, telemedicine has been a huge blessing. I know Bobby feels the same way. But we really, if we were in another time where iPad technology was not in place, at the last house, when he was at the other campus, their Wi-Fi connection was really spotty. And when Alec wants to be on his iPad and talk, he needs to move at the same time. He's walking and talking and carrying his iPad, and it would drop connection. We wouldn't be able to talk. It would be just terrible. At the new house, which is smaller, less kids, the Wi-Fi is great. And we were able to establish communication as much as he could communicate with us with his limited vocab and abilities. We had meaningful conversations with him. But the scary thing was that we were never able to provide him an answer. You know, when will I see you? Because our routine with him was every weekend. You'll see us. We'll come. We'll bring your dinner. It's like we call it the food parade. We walk into the house and we have, and I feel so bad for all the other kids. And we go downstairs and we've got pizza or whatever he wanted. And, you know, we go downstairs and dessert and the whole 9 yards. And that was gone. So we started sending pizza every Friday night to all the boys in the house and the staff, enough for everybody, to try to keep that in place. And then, you know, those video calls, if we didn't have them, I just don't even want to know what it would have been like. It was so heart-wrenching not to hug my child, not to see him, not to see him with my own eyes, his whole self in person, and be with him. And, but like I said, that staff mix, if we had to have this happen, we were so incredibly lucky and fortunate to have those people caring for him. He remained fairly stable, which is a big deal for him. Normally, like in the past several years, we've had to adjust psychiatric meds and epilepsy meds several times, like every couple months, something's being adjusted because things were out of whack. Whatever reason, during this situation, things were fine until he started showing just some general heightened anxiety. And we wound up doing a minor tweak that we just were really hoping would work. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. You got to throw meds and see if they stick. This one worked like a charm, settled him down just enough that he wasn't so upset and so focused on the fact that he wasn't seeing us. And just for the parents out there, my meds were adjusted too. Like every time he's going through something like this at this level, I check in with my doctor and she's like, do you need more? And I was like, right now, yes, I do.
Well, he's not going through it. You're all going through it. This is not a me, and it's not even a royal we. This is a real we. This is, again, my own son is 19 years old and is typically developing, and he's been away at college and back home at school, and I know what kind of worry and anxiety I have for him, and I can only imagine what is on yours and Bobby's plate. So if he's feeling anxious, if you're feeling anxious, there's nothing irrational about that. You're certainly very entitled, all of you, and Alec as well. That is, again, fully understood. And I am so glad to hear, and I certainly hope some of the staff tune into this, and I hope they know how appreciated they are. I'm sure you've made them feel how appreciated. I've been lucky myself to work with a tremendous number of people in this field. I've been in the field for about 35, 36 years now, and run across some just amazing individuals. In the last year, I've really seen a number of people really demonstrate themselves and really, show their mettle, or whatever the expression my father would have used. My father was the king of cliches, so I'm trying to think of the expression he would use. It's interesting, we're talking about the visits. We've talked about this with some other interviews that, again, thank heaven for the electronics that we have now that we wouldn't have had just a few years ago, or even how good the Wi-Fi connections are, as you said. I'm glad to hear that Alec responded well to that. That hasn't been the case for everyone. For some people, it's even been a source of heightened anxiety, that they can only see people on video, and does this mean that this is a new normal and I will never see my parents again? And sometimes the videos almost seem to make it a little worse, like it was highlighting the difference between what had been and what was now. And for Alec, did you have any kind of sense, was he able to understand what's happening in terms of the virus, in terms of the hopefully temporary nature of these adjustments? Were you able to get a sense of how Alec was processing it all?
They made a decision, the program, to not tell the individuals who they did not believe would be able to comprehend and understand it, anything about it. Recently, after we were able to see him again for a good long while over the summer and the fall, we had another quarantine because he was exposed to someone at school who tested positive. So they locked them down for 14 days, and we had to go through it again. But I insisted this time that even if we didn't feel that he could comprehend it, I did want it explained in some way, because I had this sinking feeling that he was translating this as, I did something wrong and I can't see my parents, or that there was, I didn't want him to think we were abandoning him and with no explanation. So that weighed so heavily. I was like, you've got to figure out a way to tell him. So they created a social story, which he usually responds to. It was very very, very simple. And they were reading it to him on a schedule. Like, they would always make sure they would read it again, reinforce it. We don't know how much he's comprehending, but I, in my heart, feel it was enough of an effort that we have something, that was able to tell him that it's not his fault and we haven't abandoned him. Those were like the two major things.
That is tremendous, and I'm so glad to hear that was done. I got to admit, that's one of my little pet peeves that I have in the field sometimes, is that some people do what I call infantilization, and maybe that's me being harsh. But even if I don't know that somebody will definitely process it, I don't see the harm in explaining it. Even when I'm doing behavior treatment plans that I don't know if someone's going to understand all the consequences we're putting in place, I explain them anyway. What does it hurt me to explain them? And if it's a little confusing or something, maybe the person will learn a little bit more easily through the experience if I verbally explained it, but I certainly don't lose anything. And I hate the idea of somebody possibly being able to make misattributions like that. Like, someone's mad at me because, it's easy to make up stuff in your mind. And particularly for people diagnosed on the autism spectrum who sometimes have ritualistic kind of behaviors and thinking, something that you wouldn't even entertain. Oh, I dropped the knife and that's why this is happening. It's my fault for dropping the knife. That's a real possibility. So again, applause to you for that insistence. Nobody's better than the mom here, for insisting that they really do, do that. And again, the social story and, making things clear, and most importantly, making sure he knew it wasn't his fault. And again, trying to outline, that this is what's happening right now, and hopefully it won't be happening for a heck of a lot longer. But that's really wonderful to hear that that came around that way, because I would be concerned if the truth was sort of being hidden. It's real easy to make a misattribution, and again, when we have people with very rigid thinking in the first place, it's very easy for mistakes to be made, and then sometimes it's hard to get that mistake out of someone's head. Once they get the idea that this is what's happened, it can be hard to change that. What about other sort of activities? I mean, this has gone on a lot longer than any of us expected. And so there are sort of milestone activities we expected. I mean, we went through Halloween, we went through Thanksgiving, we're coming up on Christmas. So many of these times, holidays, festivals, there may have been birthdays. Odds are within the last 9 months there were birthdays. How have those sort of been handled, and have those been bumps in the road?
So I was really worried about how he's very, very affectionate about birthdays. He knows, you can tell him your birthday once, like a new person working with him. He will always remember when your birthday is, and he'll always want to tell you in case you forgot when your birthday is. His sister's birthday, she was turning 13 in May, back in May. And I'm like, I can't even imagine that he's not going to be part of this. So we worked with the house. The house got a cake for her, and we sung happy birthday. The boys at the house sung happy birthday. We got on a FaceTime call, and that actually worked out really well. And I took a screenshot, and in that moment, I captured both of my children smiling at the same time. And it's been on my phone as my main page ever since. So that was like my big triumph. Like, I was so excited that they were willing to work with us for that, and just make things easier. I am really nervous because his birthday's coming up in January, and that's always a big deal for him. And at any moment, we could get a call that someone else is positive and they're going to quarantine again. And I'm really very, very nervous about the other shoe dropping with all of this, and being in another quarantine that covers his birthday. And even right now, I have friends whose kids are in quarantine and they can't see them for Christmas, depending on which house they live in and what classroom they're in over at the school. So I also have to say too, though, that I know how fortunate we are on the flip side to families that haven't been able to access services, who have their children not in residential, but still living at home, that have not been able to access any sort of programming or any special education services, and they're not able to do it, via computer and distance learning, and it's a big mess. And I feel so horribly for those kids and those parents. And so if there's any silver lining, it's been that he's had continual programming through this whole thing. Even when he doesn't have the programming at the school, if they had to stop whatever they're doing, they still were providing some sort of support in his residence, and just cross-referencing with the school and giving them some sort of something, so I was very, very happy about that. So big events, yes. I'm just worried that, tomorrow we get a phone call that we can't bring him for his home visit for Christmas. And that would absolutely crush me.
You, you have such a beautifully gracious attitude about life. I love that about you. You really try to find a positive. I mean, you're looking at a possible, day by day. The Christmas is literally around the corner. It doesn't get much closer than now. And you always find the silver lining. You always, have these really creative ways to try and solve what would otherwise be a really, big hiccup for you. I just want to jump in and just say that I love that about you. And you also are so great at telling your story honestly, authentically. It's really inspiring. I hope that you inspire other parents to do that. I think it's really brave. And I know you, have been on the news before sharing your story. I've listened to you on podcasts before. You're always beautiful and gracious. So it's always nice to hear you speak. But I love how truthful you are too. And you can do it in such a nice, positive way. I really hope that inspires families to do the same.
Thank you.
How have
A
the
similar
reaction?
way about you, Bobby.
That goes without saying. It's funny when we do the Bobby and Bobby show, as we call it. One of the things that I always find myself saying is, and by the way, if you haven't figured it out, she's the nice one. And, that's, there's definite differences in personalities here. And I'm sure Bobby has been asked more than once, how do you tolerate him? Because she's just so happy and positive all the time. And I am very often anything but. I am curious, though, what Bobby mentioned about your having been on the news, telling the story. How has the reaction been from people who've heard your story? We are trying to, in other episodes, we've kind of talked about what people might do to help, to support. People have asked frequently about what they can do to help and to contribute to, ending this, and I know you feel strongly about that. So I'm curious, both positive, and I hate to say it, but if there ever was anything negative, I would be curious if anybody had anything to say. But how has the reaction been to your prior media, discussions of your story?
Well, the basis for sharing it was that it was June, and so we were still in lockdown, and there was no end in sight. These kids were, and the adults in residential placement were being lumped in with nursing homes and vulnerable population of elderly people in nursing homes, whereas we really felt that these kids were different and that their mental health was suffering greatly. Not that you're not if you're in a nursing home. I know there's a lot going on with them too. But when you throw in the developmental disabilities and the mental health on top of it, there's just so much going on. And parents really got together and were saying, we're essential too. We're essential to our children. And they are still just children. And they are suffering because they don't have access to their parents and their families. So I was just watching, our governor every day religiously, waiting to hear, are you gonna mention our kids? Like, are you gonna mention when we're gonna be able to see them again? Why, and then people started a letter writing campaign and emailing him. And then a few parent friends of mine whose kids are in the same house, we got together, and a few of them contacted media reporters, and I hadn't gotten to that point yet, but one mom got in touch with a local reporter who I've seen on the news a lot, and she messaged me and was like, hey, I don't want to be on camera, but I got so-and-so and she wants to do an interview. Can you do it? And I'm like, I guess. So we had the TV station pull up to our house, and we're wearing masks, but then we're far enough away, and she's got her microphone on a shower pole, like all the way away from me. And I'm telling my story saying, that why can't we see our kids? And this is really, really rough. And, you know, my husband was with me, he talked, and, you know, we were just getting the story out there, and we got on, they linked it to Facebook, and some negative was, people who don't understand our kids and understand residential, because I had mentioned that he entered his program at 10 years old. People were chastising me. How could you give your child up at 10 years old? How could you do that? It was a lot. There were some really awful things said, but I knew that that was the risk. And I knew that that's why the other parent probably didn't want to take the risk. So I'm like, all right, I'm just going to let this roll off my back, because all my friends swooped in to that post where people were saying awful things and combating them. Like they were posting and trying to negate everything that they were saying. And, you know, and so that was wonderful that I had that, everybody had my back. So it was more important that we got this message out to the governor. And a few days later, I was able to see my son again. And I don't think it was just me. It was a collective voice all around New York State. And we made it happen and educated the governor. You know, our kids are not the same as nursing homes. This is not the same. On top of it, you're requiring nursing home staff to be tested twice a week, but our staff doesn't have to be tested. Like, what does that say about how you're prioritizing? You can't lump them in the same category if you're not going to put the same precautions in place. So that really burned me. Like, that drove me nuts, that part. But yeah, I mean, I'm so glad that we got those visits back, and it was mid-June. So it was mid-March to mid-June. And that's a really long time not to see your child, and for your child not to see you.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for taking that on yourself. I know that you put yourself in that vulnerable position where, forgive me, I'm going to be mean here, internet trolls or other people can really just throw their slings and arrows, as I've called them. And I really admire your ability to stand up there and take that, and to take this on knowing that that was probably going to happen. And on behalf of everybody, I say thank you for putting yourself in that firing line. And if it's not a t-shirt or a bumper or sticker or a card magnet yet, parents are essential, definitely should be. So I don't know if that's in the works, but if it's not, somebody get on that right now, because as you were speaking, parents are essential, just hit me as a statement that sums up so much that really has been lost in this conversation. So again, I have to say thank you. I know we're coming close to the end of the amount of time that we asked you to set aside. So I'm going to first ask if you would be willing to come back again, because I'm sure there's more for us to talk about. But I don't want to cut us off prematurely either. And I want to throw it over to Bobby for any comments or color that she would like to add here as well.
Well, first, let me just say, Christina, you did a wonderful job on that news story. You represented parents like myself so well, because we were home waiting for the lockdown to end as well. And I was just really grateful that you did it. I remember that whole time, and I remember reading some of the comments, and I was personally infuriated by them. And then there was a mom in Albany who also did a local story, and she received some pretty heavy comments as well. And just so that you know, parent to parent, that time in watching you and her and another friend of mine who lives downstate New York, and some of the stuff that happened after, I had actually made a personal decision then and there to start getting braver myself about the stuff that I shared about Joey. So I just share that with you because I think you never know the impact that you make unless someone takes a moment to tell you. And I've been presenting, as you know, for a really long time about my son, but up until very recently, I was very careful because of all the things you're saying. I was kind of just tired and burnt out from hearing the negative comments about whatever I shared. And that was our truth, our authentic truth that I would be sharing. And so it was really difficult. And I stopped and I started just telling all of our celebrations, and I posted our celebrations, and I focused on that. And I just started in the last couple of years talking about the fact that he's on the severe end, and here's the challenges that that poses for our family. And then when that happened, and I saw a few of, you know, my friends who went ahead and for all of our sakes, including my own, who benefited from your interview, you know, and they still had to deal with that. I thought, I'm done. I'm going to get braver from this moment on. So I just wanted to share with you that you personally inspired me. And I was really happy to have you join us today because of that, so that I could both tell you, but also because, again, like I said, you're so positive in the way that you speak about really difficult things, that I think it will give parents an example. Yes, you can be brave and talk about your child too. And you can talk about the hard stuff, and it's still a really beautiful conversation. So I want to share that with you. I want to thank you for the way that you talk and the way that you speak, and how you inspire so many parents like myself. And I just want to take this opportunity to say to the people that are listening, because we are recording this and we will be sharing, that we hope that you leave positive comments and that you share interviews like this. We want more families to have access to hearing stuff that might help their healing process. And if for some reason there's something in the context of any of our interviews that you don't agree with, that's okay. That's totally your decision, and you have the right to disagree. But I would just ask that whatever you share, whatever commentary you leave, it's lifting people up, because that's really what we all need. And that's the entire sole purpose of these COVID conversations, is to lift us up. And we need that so badly right now. And you are, Christina, the epitome of that. So thank you.
Thank you for those lovely words.
So I just want to chime in a little bit that I feel that you guys have done a great job, not just with understanding COVID, but there's been some misunderstandings about just what it means to have to place a child into residential. I think a lot of people contextually think about the old throw away the key sort of thing, where people were told not to visit their children, let alone be involved. And I think this video highlights how much, how you two are very involved in your children's lives. And it was a level of support they needed, excuse me. And hopefully that will maybe eschew some of the misunderstandings of what it means to have to put a child into a residential facility. So maybe some silver lining there that maybe some people will understand. These are two very involved moms. I can say that and speak that myself, that just because your child has been put in residential, that doesn't mean you haven't given up the fight. You are still fighting for your kids and supporting your kids and doing what's best for them. So I've always loved that about the two of you. So as a fellow parent, I can tell you that I know that that's really significant, and it's really important that people understand that it's not the out of sight, out of mind sort of thing. You guys are both very heavily involved in your kids' lives. And not only that, but you both are involved in helping other families at the same time. So that's really amazing, the two of you, what you've done for our community. And so I just want to say that myself. I like to chime in a little bit at the end of these things. But in the end, just want to thank everybody for being here today. That ends today's COVID talk, the Bobby and Bobby Show. And we look forward to hearing some more great stuff and sharing. And we will see you soon. Take care.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.